The phone call came at 2 a.m., a jagged blade slicing through Ethan Caldwell's dream of a perfect life. He woke to the buzz of his phone, Liam's name glowing on the screen, but the voice wasn't his fiancé's. It was a stranger's, slurred and cruel, laughing about a secret that would shatter Ethan's world. By dawn, Ethan stood alone in their Manhattan apartment, staring at the engagement ring he'd slipped onto Liam's finger 6 months ago, now tainted by the echo of betrayal. Ethan, a 32-year-old lawyer with a razor-sharp mind and a heart that trusted too easily, had built his life around Liam Harper, a 30-year-old artist whose warmth had once felt like home. They met 3 years ago at a gallery opening in Chelsea, where Liam's vibrant paintings caught Ethan's eye, but it was his laugh, soft, unguarded, that captured his heart. Their love had been a quiet rebellion against a world that sometimes stared too long, a promise sealed with plans for a spring wedding in Central Park. But that night, the stranger's voice on Liam's phone revealed a truth Ethan couldn't unhear. Liam had been unfaithful, and the betrayal ran deeper than a fleeting mistake. The apartment was silent now, save for the faint hum of the city outside. Ethan's hands trembled as he replayed the call in his mind. The man, whoever he was, had spoken of late nights, hidden texts, and a plan to keep Ethan in the dark until after the wedding. Ethan's first instinct was to confront Liam, to demand answers, but something colder took root. A need not just for truth, but for justice. He was a lawyer, after all, trained to unravel lies and wield them as weapons. If Liam thought he could betray Ethan and walk away unscathed, he was about to learn how wrong he was. Ethan sank onto the couch, the engagement ring glinting in his palm. He thought of their shared dreams, the house they'd buy upstate, the dog they'd adopt, the life they'd build. He'd given Liam everything, his trust, his future, his heart, and now, it felt like a fairy tale written in sand, washed away by a single reckless tide. But Ethan wasn't the type to crumble. He'd fought too hard to be who he was, a gay man who'd clawed his way to partner at a prestigious law firm, who'd faced down prejudice with quiet steel. If Liam had betrayed him, Ethan would turn their love story into something else entirely, a reckoning. By morning, Ethan had a plan. He wouldn't confront Liam yet. Instead, he'd dig, quietly and methodically, like he did in the courtroom. He called his best friend, Maya, a private investigator with a knack for uncovering secrets. "I need you to look into Liam," he said, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "Everything. Texts, emails, where he's been. I need to know who he's been with and why." Maya didn't ask questions. She heard the steel in his tone and promised results within days. Over the next week, Ethan played the part of the devoted fiancé. He smiled at Liam over breakfast, kissed him goodbye before work, and planned their wedding with the same enthusiasm he'd always shown. But every touch felt like a lie, every laugh a rehearsal for the moment he'd exposed the truth. Liam seemed oblivious, his brown eyes as warm as ever, his sketches of their wedding venue piling up on the kitchen table. Ethan almost wavered, almost believed it was a mistake. But then Maya's first report arrived. It was worse than he'd imagined. Liam had been meeting someone named Julian, a gallery owner in Soho, for months. There were late-night texts, hotel receipts, and photos of them together at events Ethan hadn't been invited to. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was a calculated deception, a second life Liam had built behind Ethan's back. But what stung most was the email Maya found, sent from Liam to Julian. "After the wedding, I'll figure out how to end it with Ethan. He's too good, too perfect. I don't deserve him." Those words burned. Ethan sat in his office, staring at the email on his laptop, his heart a war zone of love and rage. Liam didn't just betray him, he pitted him. The man Ethan loved thought he was too good, too weak to handle the truth. Ethan closed his laptop, his jaw tight. He wouldn't let this end in quiet heartbreak. If Liam wanted to play games, Ethan would play better. He'd turn their fairy tale into a scandal that would echo far beyond their apartment walls. The wedding was 3 weeks away, and Ethan began to weave his trap. He hired a second investigator to tail Julian, digging into his finances and his gallery's dealings. He found whispers of fraud, shady art sales, forged provenances that could ruin Julian's reputation. Ethan didn't stop there. He combed through Liam's emails, cross-referencing dates and locations with the wedding plans Liam had so carefully laid out. Every piece of evidence was a brick in the case he was building, not just against Liam's heart but against his future. One night, as Liam slept beside him, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He remembered their first date, how Liam had spilled coffee on his shirt and laughed, how Ethan had fallen for that clumsy honesty. Now he wondered if any of it was real. The pain was a living thing, clawing at his chest, but so was his resolve. He wouldn't just walk away. He'd make sure Liam and Julian faced the consequences of their choices. In the courtroom of Ethan's heart, the trial had already begun. Ethan's days became a tightrope walk between love and vengeance. By day, he was the charming fiancé, laughing with Liam over caterer menus and flower arrangements. By night, he was a man possessed, poring over documents in his home office, piecing together the puzzle of Liam's double life. The evidence was damning. Receipts for dinners Ethan hadn't attended, gallery events where Liam and Julian had posed for photos, their smiles too close, too intimate. Each discovery was a fresh wound, but Ethan channeled his pain into precision, building a case as airtight as any he'd argued in court. Maya's updates came daily now, each one a blow. She'd hacked into Julian's email, a risky move, but Ethan didn't care about ethics anymore. The gallery owner was reckless, bragging to friends about his arrangement with Liam, how they'd keep it quiet until after the wedding. Julian's words were smug. Ethan's too busy with his law firm to notice. Liam's mine when it counts. Ethan read those lines until they blurred, his fists clenched. He wasn't just fighting for his heart anymore, he was fighting for his dignity. Liam, oblivious, continued to play the doting partner. One evening, he surprised Ethan with a sketch of their wedding altar, a delicate watercolor of roses and ivy. "For us," Liam said, his voice soft, his eyes searching Ethan's for approval. Ethan forced a smile, his stomach churning. How could Liam look at him like that, knowing what he'd done? The hypocrisy fueled Ethan's resolve. He began to see Liam not as the man he loved, but as an opponent in a game he intended to win. Ethan's plan took shape in the form of a legal strategy. Julian's gallery was a house of cards, built on questionable deals and forged documents. Ethan found evidence of tax evasion, shady loans, and artworks sold with falsified provenances. He could have gone to the authorities, but that was too clean. Instead, he decided to expose Julian and Liam at the wedding itself. The guest list included Manhattan's elite: lawyers, artists, and influencers. It would be the perfect stage for a scandal. He enlisted Maya's help to plant the evidence. She created a digital slideshow, a devastating montage of emails, texts, and photos that would play during the reception. Ethan imagined the moment. The lights dimming, the screen flickering to life, and the gasps as their fairy tale unraveled before 200 guests. But even as he planned, doubt crept in. What if Liam had a reason? What if love could still salvage them? Ethan pushed the thoughts aside. Love didn't lie like this. One afternoon, Ethan met Maya at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. She slid a folder across the table, her face grim. "You need to see this," she said. Inside were bank statements showing transfers from Liam's account to Julian's. Small but consistent, labeled as consulting fees. Ethan's blood ran cold. Was Liam not just cheating, but funding Julian's schemes? The betrayal deepened, a chasm Ethan couldn't bridge. "He's been playing me for a fool," Ethan whispered. Maya reached for his hand. "You don't have to go through with the wedding, you know?" Ethan shook his head. "Oh, I'm going through with it, but not the way he thinks." The days ticked down, each one heavier than the last. Ethan's colleagues noticed his distraction, but he brushed them off, citing wedding stress. At home, Liam was a whirlwind of excitement, planning their honeymoon in Maine, oblivious to the storm brewing. Ethan watched him, torn between the man he'd loved and the stranger he'd uncovered. One night, Liam caught Ethan staring. "You okay, babe?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "Just thinking about the future," he said, and the lie tasted like ash. Ethan's investigation uncovered one final piece. A contract between Liam and Julian, buried in a cloud drive. It outlined a deal where Liam would funnel clients to Julian's gallery in exchange for a cut of the profits. The contract was dated a year ago, before Ethan had even proposed. The realization hit like a punch. Liam's betrayal wasn't a lapse. It was a calculated choice, woven into the fabric of their relationship from the start. Ethan felt the last threads of hope snap. There was no going back now. As the wedding approached, Ethan's resolve hardened. He met with a tech specialist to ensure the slideshow would run flawlessly, synced to the moment he'd give his toast. He practiced his speech, a blend of love and venom, designed to cut deep. The night before the rehearsal dinner, he stood in front of the mirror, staring at the man he'd become. His reflection was sharper, colder, but still Ethan, the man who'd loved Liam with everything he had, and who'd now destroy him with the same intensity. The fairy tale was over. The scandal was just beginning. The rehearsal dinner was a masquerade of smiles and clinking glasses, held in a sleek Manhattan loft with views of the skyline. Ethan moved through the crowd, shaking hands, laughing at jokes, his heart a ticking bomb. Liam was radiant, his arm around Ethan's waist, whispering about their vows as if nothing was wrong. Every word from Liam's lips was a spark, igniting Ethan's fury, but he kept his mask in place, waiting for the moment to strike. The loft was filled with their closest friends and family, oblivious to the storm brewing. Ethan's sister, Claire, pulled him aside, her eyes soft with concern. "You seem off, Ethan. Everything okay?" He forced a grin, the kind that had won over juries. "Just nerves," he lied, but her frown lingered. Claire had always seen through him, but tonight he couldn't afford to crack. He excused himself, slipping into the bathroom to check his phone. Maya had texted, "Slideshow's ready. Tech's in place. You sure about this?" Ethan typed back, "I've never been more sure." Back at the dinner, Liam stood to give a toast. His voice was warm, his words dripping with love. "Ethan's my anchor," he said, his eyes locked on Ethan's. "He's the man who makes every day brighter, who makes me believe in forever." The room cooed, glasses raised, but Ethan's stomach twisted. How could Liam stand there, lying so effortlessly? He clapped along with the guests, his smile ablaze. Tomorrow, at the wedding, Liam would learn what forever really meant. That night, Ethan barely slept. He lay beside Liam, listening to his steady breathing, wrestling with the urge to shake him awake and demand the truth. But confrontation wasn't enough anymore. Ethan wanted more than answers. He wanted Liam to feel the weight of his betrayal, to see it reflected in the eyes of everyone they knew. He wanted Julian's world to crumble too, his gallery exposed as a fraud. The wedding, meant to be their triumph, would be their undoing. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear, Central Park awash in spring light. Ethan dressed in his tailored suit, the mirror reflecting a man he barely recognized, sharp, composed, but burning inside. Liam was in the next room, humming as he adjusted his tie, unaware that Ethan had spent the night finalizing his plan. Maya had sent the final piece of evidence, a recorded call between Liam and Julian, plotting to siphon money from Ethan's savings after the wedding. The audacity of it stole Ethan's breath. They hadn't just betrayed his heart, they'd planned to bleed him dry. At the venue, guests filled the rows of white chairs, roses blooming along the aisle. Ethan stood at the altar, his pulse steady, his face a mask of calm. Liam approached, his smile radiant, and for a moment, Ethan's resolve faltered. He saw the man he'd loved, the artist who'd painted his world in colors he'd never known. But then he remembered the emails, the lies, the money. He took Liam's hands, his grip firm, and whispered, "You look perfect." The words were true, but they carried a promise of ruin. The ceremony was flawless, a fairy tale unfolding under the spring sky. Vows were exchanged, tears shed, and the crowd cheered as they kissed. Ethan's lips touched Liam's, and for a fleeting second, he wished things were different. But the moment passed, and the reception began. The tent was a vision of elegance. Chandeliers, white linens, and a dance floor waiting for their first dance. Ethan excused himself to check on the caterer, slipping away to meet the tech specialist. The slideshow was loaded, the projector ready. It was time. As the guests settled with their champagne, Ethan took the microphone for his toast. His voice was steady, warm, drawing smiles from the crowd. "Liam and I built something beautiful," he began, his eyes on his husband. "A love story that felt like a dream. But dreams can hide truths, and tonight, you'll see ours." The room stilled, confused, as the screen behind him flickered to life. The first slide appeared, a photo of Liam and Julian, arms around each other, followed by a text message, "Ethan won't suspect a thing." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Liam's face drained of color, his eyes wide with panic. Ethan kept speaking, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "This is the man I married," he said, as another slide showed the contract, the bank transfers, the email about ending things. "A man who planned to betray me, to steal from me, to lie to us all." The room was chaos now. Whispers, shouts, Claire's hand over her mouth. Liam stumbled forward, reaching for Ethan, but Ethan stepped back, his eyes cold. "You don't get to touch me anymore," he said. The slideshow ended with the recorded call, Julian's voice smug, Liam's agreeing to the plan. The guests were frozen, some crying, others staring at Liam in disgust. Ethan dropped the microphone, the thud echoing in the silence. He walked out, leaving Liam alone in the wreckage of their fairy tale. The scandal now a living thing, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. The tent erupted into chaos as Ethan walked away, the weight of 200 stunned gazes burning into Liam's back. Ethan didn't look back. He pushed through the crowd, past the roses and chandeliers, into the cool night air of Central Park. His heart pounded, not with triumph but with a hollow ache. He'd done it, exposed Liam, humiliated Julian, but the victory tasted like ash. The man he'd loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who'd planned to ruin him. Inside, Liam was surrounded, friends demanding answers, family whispering in shock. Ethan's sister, Claire, chased after him, her heels clicking on the path. "Ethan, wait!" she called, grabbing his arm. Her eyes were wet, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me? We could have stopped this quietly." Ethan shook his head, his jaw tight. "Quiet doesn't teach a lesson, Claire." He needed to feel it. They both did. She hugged him, but he stood rigid, his mind already racing to the next step. By morning, the scandal was everywhere. Social media buzzed with clips of the slideshow, hashtags like wedding betrayal trending. Ethan's phone lit up with messages, support from friends, venom from Liam's allies, and reporters begging for a statement. He ignored them all, retreating to his office at the law firm. There, surrounded by case files and the familiar hum of his computer, he began to draft his next move. A lawsuit against Julian's gallery for fraud, with Liam named as a co-conspirator. Maya met him at the office, her expression a mix of pride and worry. "You pulled it off," she said, sliding a coffee across his desk. "But you look like hell." Ethan managed a weak smile. "Feels like it too." He opened his laptop, showing her the complaint he'd drafted. It outlined Julian's forged provenances, the illegal transfers, and Liam's role in funneling clients to the scheme. "This could ruin them both," Maya said, her voice low. Ethan nodded. "That's the point." Days later, Ethan filed the lawsuit in Manhattan's federal court. The news spread like wildfire, art blogs and legal journals dissecting the case. Julian's gallery issued a frantic statement denying the allegations, but the evidence was overwhelming. Liam, meanwhile, went silent. He'd moved out of their apartment, leaving only a note. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I never meant to hurt you." Ethan burned it, the flames curling the paper into nothing. Sorry wasn't enough. The first court hearing was a spectacle. Ethan, in his sharpest suit, sat at the plaintiff's table, his face a mask of calm. Julian was there, his smugness replaced by pale anxiety. Liam sat in the back, his eyes red, avoiding Ethan's gaze. The judge, a stern woman with a reputation for fairness, reviewed the evidence with a raised eyebrow. "This is quite the tale," she said, her tone dry. Ethan's lawyer, a colleague he'd trusted for years, presented the emails, the contract, the bank records. The room felt electric, every word a step toward justice. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Ethan gave a brief statement, his voice steady. "This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. No one should build a life on lies." The cameras flashed, capturing his resolve, but inside he was unraveling. He'd won the first round, but the cost was his heart, his trust, his belief in love. He drove home alone, the city blurring past, and poured a whiskey he didn't drink. That night, Claire called. "Liam's been trying to reach you," she said. "He's a mess, Ethan. He wants to talk." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "There's nothing to say," he snapped, but the words felt hollow. Part of him, the part that still remembered Liam's laugh, his warmth, wanted answers, not just evidence. Against his better judgment, he agreed to meet Liam at a quiet cafe in the village. Liam looked wrecked when Ethan arrived. His eyes were sunken, his hands fidgeting with a napkin. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," Liam said, his voice breaking. "Julian was a mistake. I was scared, Ethan. You're so perfect, and I felt like I'd never measure up." Ethan's chest tightened, but he kept his face cold. "You didn't just cheat, Liam. You planned to rob me. You lied to my face for a year." Liam flinched, tears spilling. "I loved you," he whispered. "I still do." Ethan wanted to believe him, wanted to salvage something from the wreckage. But the evidence was undeniable, the betrayal too deep. "Love doesn't do this," he said, standing. "You made your choice. Now live with it." He walked out, leaving Liam sobbing at the table, the weight of his own actions crushing him. Ethan's steps were steady, but his heart was a storm. The lawsuit would continue, the scandal would grow, but the hardest battle was within him, letting go of the man he'd once called his future. The courtroom became Ethan's battlefield, each hearing a chance to reclaim the dignity Liam and Julian had stolen. He sat ramrod straight, his notes meticulous, his arguments razor-sharp. The evidence was a tidal wave. Forged art provenances, illicit bank transfers, and Liam's signed contract with Julian's gallery. Ethan's colleagues whispered that he was relentless, a man transformed by betrayal into something unyielding. But at night, alone in his apartment, the weight of it all pressed down. The love he'd lost, the life he'd planned, now ashes. Julian's defense was flimsy, his lawyer scrambling to discredit the emails and recordings. But Ethan's team was prepared, countering every move with precision. During one hearing, Julian took the stand, his voice dripping with false confidence. "It was just business," he claimed, dismissing the transfers as consulting fees. Ethan's lawyer pounced, presenting a text from Julian to Liam. "Once we're set, Ethan's money is ours." The courtroom buzzed, the judge's frown deepening. Ethan felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it was fleeting. Winning didn't heal. Liam's role in the case was quieter but no less damning. He'd been named a co-conspirator, his involvement in the gallery's fraud laid bare. He sat in the back of the courtroom, his face gaunt, his eyes avoiding Ethan's. Once, during a recess, their gazes locked. Liam's lips parted, as if to speak, but Ethan turned away. There was nothing left to say. The man he'd loved was a ghost, replaced by someone who traded their future for greed. Outside the courtroom, the scandal grew legs. Art magazines ran exposés on Julian's gallery, clients pulling out as the fraud allegations spread. Ethan's firm fielded calls from reporters, but he stayed silent, letting the evidence speak. Social media was less kind. Memes mocked Liam, calling him the gold-digging groom, while others praised Ethan's courage. He ignored it all, focusing on the case. But late at night, scrolling through old photos of him and Liam, he felt the ache of what could have been. Claire became his anchor, showing up with takeout and forcing him to eat. "You're winning, Ethan," she said one night, her voice firm. "But don't let this destroy you." He nodded, but the truth was he didn't know how to stop. The lawsuit was his purpose now, a way to channel the pain. He hired a forensic accountant to trace more of Julian's finances, uncovering a web of offshore accounts. Each discovery was a brick in the wall he was building, not just to ruin Julian but to protect himself from ever feeling this vulnerable again. One afternoon, Maya called with a lead. "There's a witness," she said. "A former gallery assistant who saw Liam and Julian planning the client funnel. She's willing to testify." Ethan met the assistant, a nervous young woman named Sarah, in a diner. She confirmed everything. Liam's late-night meetings, Julian's promises of profit, the lies they spun to keep Ethan in the dark. "Liam seemed conflicted," Sarah admitted. "Like he loved you but couldn't stop." Ethan thanked her, his voice flat. Her words didn't soften the betrayal. They only made it more real. The testimony was a turning point. Sarah's account, backed by emails and receipts, painted a vivid picture of deceit. The judge's expression grew sterner, and Julian's lawyer faltered. Ethan watched Liam during the testimony, saw the way his hands shook, his face pale. Part of Ethan wanted to feel pity, but the larger part, the part forged in pain, wanted justice. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering, "Push harder. End this." As the trial progressed, Ethan's life outside the courtroom shrank. He stopped going to the gym, ignored friends' invites, and buried himself in work. The wedding ring sat in a drawer, a relic of a life he no longer recognized. But one evening, a letter arrived, slipped under his door. It was from Liam, handwritten, the ink smudged in places. "I know you hate me," it began. "I hate myself too. I never meant to hurt you, but I was weak. Julian offered a way out of my insecurities, and I took it. I'll testify against him if it helps you heal." Ethan read the letter twice, then tore it to pieces. Liam's remorse was too late, his offer a desperate ploy. But the words lingered, stirring doubts. What if Liam testified? Could it change anything? Ethan pushed the thought aside. He didn't want Liam's help. He wanted him to face the consequences. The trial was nearing its end, and Ethan was ready to close this chapter, even if it meant closing his heart. The courtroom was a pressure cooker as the trial neared its climax. Ethan sat at the plaintiff's table, his notes a fortress of facts, his heart a locked vault. The evidence was overwhelming now. Sarah's testimony, the accountant's findings, and a new bombshell. Maya had uncovered a second set of books for Julian's gallery, hidden in an encrypted drive. It showed millions in unreported sales, with Liam's name tied to several transactions. Ethan's lawyer presented it with a flourish, and the judge's pen paused, her eyes narrowing. Julian's composure cracked on the stand. Under cross-examination, he stammered, contradicting his own statements. Ethan watched, his face impassive, but inside, he felt a grim satisfaction. Julian's empire was crumbling, and Liam was next. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, reporters scribbling furiously. Ethan's colleagues nodded at him from the gallery, their respect palpable. He turned a personal betrayal into a public reckoning, but the victory felt hollow. Liam was called to testify, a last-minute decision by Julian's lawyer to shift blame. He took the stand, his eyes hollow, his voice barely audible. "I didn't know the full extent of Julian's deals," he said, his gaze flickering to Ethan. I thought I was helping the gallery, not this. Ethan's lawyer pounced, holding up the contract with Liam's signature. You expect us to believe you were unaware of fraud when you signed this? Liam's shoulders slumped, his silence damning. Ethan looked away, the sight of Liam's defeat too raw. After the hearing, Ethan lingered in the courthouse hallway, his mind racing. Claire found him, her face tight with worry. He's telling the truth, isn't he? About not knowing everything? Ethan shook his head. It doesn't matter, Claire. He lied to me, planned to take my money. Truth now is just damage control. She sighed, touching his arm. You're right, but you loved him, Ethan. Don't forget that part of you. Her words stung, a reminder of the man he used to be. That night, Ethan sat in his apartment, the city's lights a distant glow. He opened the drawer with the wedding ring, turning it in his fingers. He remembered the day he'd bought it, how he'd imagined growing old with Liam. Now it was a symbol of trust shattered. He closed the drawer, his jaw tight. The trial would end soon, but the real fight was within him, finding a way to move forward without the man he'd built his dreams around. The next hearing brought a surprise. Liam's lawyer approached Ethan's team with a plea deal. Liam would testify fully against Julian, providing details of every transaction. In exchange for leniency, Ethan's first instinct was to reject it, to let Liam face the full weight of the law. But his lawyer argued it could strengthen the case against Julian, ensuring his gallery's collapse. Ethan relented, but only after adding a condition. Liam would have no contact with him, ever. The deal was signed, and Liam took the stand again. His testimony was a gut punch. Liam detailed Julian's schemes, how he'd manipulated Liam with promises of wealth, exploiting his insecurities about measuring up to Ethan. I loved Ethan, Liam said, his voice breaking, but I felt like I'd never be enough. Julian made me believe I could be more. The courtroom was silent, every word heavy. Ethan stared at his notes, refusing to meet Liam's eyes. He didn't want to feel pity, but it crept in, a traitor to his anger. Julian's fate was sealed. The judge ruled in Ethan's favor, ordering the gallery's assets frozen and Julian to pay restitution. Criminal charges were pending, and the art world turned its back on him. Liam escaped with probation, his reputation in tatters. Ethan left the courthouse, the weight of victory heavy on his shoulders. Reporters shouted questions, but he walked past, his silence louder than any statement. At home, Maya brought a bottle of wine, trying to celebrate. You did it, Ethan. You took them down. He nodded, but his smile was thin. Then why doesn't it feel like enough? He asked. Maya sighed, her eyes soft. Because you loved him. And love doesn't just vanish, even when it hurts. She was right, and Ethan hated it. He'd won the case, but the cost was a piece of himself he'd never get back. The trial was over, but Ethan's heart was still on trial. He stood on his apartment balcony, the Manhattan skyline glittering, a reminder of the life he'd once planned with Liam. The lawsuit had ended Julian's career, and Liam's name was a cautionary tale in art circles. Ethan had won, but the victory left him hollow, a man who'd traded love for justice and found neither fully satisfying. He sipped his coffee, the bitterness mirroring his mood, and wondered how to rebuild from here. Work became his refuge. Ethan threw himself into new cases, his reputation as a relentless lawyer cemented by the scandal. Colleagues whispered about his courage, clients sought his precision, but none saw the nights he spent staring at old sketches Liam had left behind. A sunset, a portrait of Ethan laughing. He couldn't bring himself to throw them out, each one a reminder of a love that had felt real, even if it wasn't. Claire insisted he start therapy, and though Ethan resisted, he eventually gave in. The therapist, a kind woman with sharp insights, asked him to confront the question he'd avoided. What do you want now, Ethan? He didn't have an answer. For years, his wants had been tied to Liam, their wedding, their home, their future. Now he was untethered, a ship without a harbor. The realization was both terrifying and freeing. One spring morning, a year after the wedding, Ethan walked through Central Park, the same place where he'd planned to marry Liam. The roses were blooming again, their scent heavy with memory. He sat on a bench, the one from their first date, and let himself feel the weight of it all, the love, the betrayal, the fight. A young couple passed, hand in hand, and Ethan smiled faintly. He didn't envy them, but he didn't hate them either. He was learning to let go. Maya called with an update. Julian had been indicted on federal charges. His gallery shuttered. Liam had moved to Chicago, starting over as a teacher, far from the art world's glare. Ethan felt a pang, not of longing but of closure. Liam was rebuilding, and so would he. He started small, joining a book club, adopting a rescue dog named Scout, painting his apartment in colors Liam would have hated. Each step was a reclaiming of himself. One evening, at a gallery opening, a place he'd avoided since the scandal, Ethan met someone. His name was Sam, a quiet architect with a warm laugh and eyes that didn't hide secrets. They talked for hours, not about love or futures, but about art, life, the city. It wasn't a fairy tale, and Ethan didn't want one. He wanted something real, built on trust, not dreams that could shatter. Months later, Ethan stood in his office, packing for a weekend trip with Sam. A colleague dropped off a package, a small painting, and signed, sent anonymously. It was a watercolor of Central Park, roses in bloom, with a note. "You deserved better. I'm sorry." Ethan knew it was Liam's work, the brushstrokes unmistakable. He didn't burn it this time. He tucked it away, a reminder not of pain but of resilience. He'd survived betrayal, turned a fairy tale into a scandal, and come out stronger. As he left the office, Scout's leash in one hand, Sam's number in his phone, Ethan felt something new. Hope. It wasn't loud or grand, but it was enough. The courtroom had given him justice, but life was giving him a second chance. He stepped into the evening, the city alive around him, and for the first time in a long time he felt like he was home. The scandal had shaken Manhattan, a cautionary tale of love and lies. But for Ethan, it was more. It was the story of a man who'd faced betrayal and chose to fight, not just for justice but for himself. He'd turned their fairy tale into a court scandal, but in the end, he'd written a new story, one where he was the hero, not the victim. And that, he realized, was the most human victory of all.